Hi, everyone, and welcome to Wednesday's broadcast. Surprise, it's me today. So, hopefully, all of y'all that were on Wendy's page looking for it will eventually come on and find me over here on my page. We have a very, very special guest today that I'm waiting for her to log on here. And once she comes on, we will start talking about our topic of the day, which is bracing for impact, because that is definitely something that can kick us in the butt and it can be a very scary thing. And I'm just waiting to see her hop on. I don't know why I don't see her. Just, oh, there she is. Let me add her on. We're experimenting, so it's all new to us. Let's see, she's adding in right now. Hello, Anda.
I did it!
Yay!
Hi!
Hello, this is our special guest, Anda. She's
Hi,
amazing.
everyone. Thanks. Well, don't get
And
them all like hyped up initially. You know how like you go to a movie and like everyone tells you it's really, really good, and then you see it and you're like, I
not
don't
worth the
want that.
hype. Oh, that Anda girl, not worth the
She
hype.
was like, she was fine.
She was so-so.
Yeah.
So anyway, this is What Do We Know with Wen and Wit. Obviously, Wen is missing from the equation today. Our goal with this series is to bring perspective, inspiration, and education about some hot topics and try to meet somewhere in the middle. Wendy has some family visiting in town, so we just let her do her thing. But lucky for you guys, like I said, we have this wonderful special guest, Anda, who's going to share her story with us, and it's going to be amazing. The topic today is bracing for impact, and she just knows the epitome of that. So I'm just going to go ahead and introduce myself, talk a little bit about what bracing for impact is, and then Anda can share her story here. So I'm a mom. I have a fur baby and a son, Dylan. Um, I'm a wife and a small business owner, and I live in Northern California. My name is Whitney. I'm the wit part of the equation. As you guys are
You
hopping on. Yeah.
you have wit and you are the wit. I
I'm
like it.
both. I'm
Yeah.
just a catch-all.
You are. Yeah.
So as you guys are coming on here and checking us out, let us know where you're tuning in from and let us know how the weather is. Anda, I don't know about you, but I'm like sweating my face off.
Oh, I love it. I'm all about it.
I am so warm already. I don't know how I'm gonna survive this summer, but if you're catching the replay, let us know that it's a replay watch so that we can give you a shout out after. So in general, why are we doing this? Like, why are we doing this Facebook series? We wanted to create something of our own. We want,
Sorry.
of course, it's fine.
Other dogs walked by, and that's not okay.
That
That's
is not
okay.
part of the plan.
Not okay.
So we wanted to use what we know to make an impact. And we also wanted to seek to gain further perspective for ourselves. School's never out for the pro, and there's always something to learn. And we always say that if you can make a difference, you must, and we can, so we must. So we hope you all join in and ask questions or share your experience with us. That's kind of what this all is about. And today the topic, like I said, is bracing for impact. So what does it mean to brace for impact? In a plane, it specifically means the way that you would brace your body so that you can manage the impact of the plane crash. Like, so there's a specific way to brace, right? Bracing for impact outside of a plane crash means if something happened to you and you couldn't physically work anymore, would you be financially secure and able to care for you or your family? Would you be able to provide the means to an end given this situation that either you expected or more often than not didn't expect? Interestingly enough, I'm a research junkie. Research shows that
You?
I'm just full of fun facts. Research shows that people who are aware of an impending collision and have time to brace for impact have better long-term outcomes and less injury, aka it hits them with less of a blow because they've prepared for it, right? So we're talking today about examples of how people can brace for impact in their lives, and some are obvious and some are not so obvious, right? So some obvious examples are retirement. Like, we know retirement's coming our whole life, right? So even though you know it's coming, it can still be really hard to plan for that. How much money is too much, not enough? How long do you save? When's a good time to retire? All of that. You certainly don't want to do the bare minimum in that situation, right? Other obvious examples, weddings, colleges, purchasing a car or home, having a child. All of these are really expensive things that you can plan for, but they definitely impact your lives, right? Hi, everyone that's on live. Hi, guys. I see you.
I can't see anyone. Why can't I see anyone? Oh, wait, yes, I can.
Tap, yeah. So you can say hi to everyone.
Oh, some people that I know. Hi,
Yeah.
Kate. This is so cool. Okay, now I know.
Yes.
Oh, I got a like. Oh my gosh, this is already fun.
Drop us some love. Drop Andhe some love. So some not obvious examples of bracing for impact are losing a job, right? Do you ever anticipate you're going to go in and they're going to say, this is your last day? I mean, it happened to me and I wasn't expecting it. It was really jarring and really sad. Unexpected home expenses. Just as a side note, I had this happen real life about 2 weeks ago. We had a water pipe burst. That's a fun $500 experimental thing that happened.
Well, and taxes were just due.
Oh,
and so,
good
right?
point.
Like tax stuff
is unexpected.
Unexpected. And
raise your hand if you expect money and then you don't get it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of people have been hit with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So taxes are a good one. Illness, some unexpected illness or injury, whether it be life-threatening or not. Tisha has a comment here. What do you say here?
She's
yes.
Being punny.
Well,
like
that's
bracing
exactly
for impact and then like brace, like a neck brace.
Well, Tisha, you're going to feel like a big jerk after you hear this story. Don't worry, she's my friend, so it's okay.
I like it.
Speaking of unexpected life events, it's about to get real because Andhe is going to share her story with us about how she's had to brace for impact in an unexpected situation. So take it away, Andhe.
Okay. Hi, you guys. My name is Andhe, and I'm coming at you from Sacramento. I am a teacher by trade. I own a small business. I have a fur baby who I love, and it's just kind of, I'm on spring break right now as a teacher, so it's kind of serendipitous that Wendy asked me last night at like 10:30 if I wanted to hop on and talk about this. I was like, oh my gosh. And so I'm sure that like all of you are, Tisha, it's okay. I'm an English teacher, so like puns are my favorite. And so I'm sure that you're all like very jealous about my neck fashion choices. And like, if you want to know where you can get some amazing neck fashion, I can let you know later on.
You earned that.
And actually a good friend of mine, post-accident, and that's what I'm going to talk about in just a second. She sent me pictures of how to bedazzle my neck brace. And so I also have those available for you as well. That is
so many
good
tips.
So many good tips. I have like so many good tips for you today. But so I'm going to be honest, this is really scary for me. This is a very vulnerable place. And I still feel like I'm walking through it and I'm still learning a lot. And so I'm sure like if I was asked to share again in 3 years, I could tell you like more formulated, wise thoughts that I've been, learning in this journey. But I'm going to just come to you guys as open and honest as possible. And please feel free to ask questions. It doesn't bother me. And it will probably be a little bit messy, and we're just going to be okay with that. So I was actually listening this morning to Brene Brown's Netflix talk. Have you watched that?
Yes, it's so good.
It's so good. And one thing she talked, actually was like listening to this part as I was freaking out and sweating in the bathroom this morning about this. And she said that vulnerability is the most accurate way to measure courage. And she said that they can measure how brave someone is by how vulnerable they're willing to be. So I was like, well, I'm just going to be very brave.
Good for you.
And so anyways, I hope that something that I talk about connects with somebody in some way, and that, maybe even just the fact that you're also going through some kind of impact, whether that's similarly or totally different. And maybe the only thing you take away is that you're not alone, and that's totally okay. So My story starts way back, in December. But it kind of feels way back because it's already almost May. Like,
Yeah.
what is going on? I feel like
Yeah.
time just goes faster and faster. So we better brace for impact. And so my husband and I, my husband Brant, who's a wonderful human being,
Mm-hmm.
we over Christmas this year went to Utah. My youngest brother and his wife just had a brand new baby, who's just such a light. We adore him. He's adorable. And on the 26th, we started making our way back. We drove to Utah. And about an hour into driving back, I remember starting to slip. And I remember like Brant doing the best that he can, or the best that he could, to try and correct again and again. And then I remember the truck starting to roll, and then everything after that is fuzzy. And that fuzziness, I now realize, is a really big blessing, because I really believe that like God knows that we can handle. And I don't think that I could have handled what happened next, but our truck rolled 3 times and the windows blew out and all of our stuff went out all over the road. And we had our 2 dogs with us, and they were both ejected from the car. Oh man. And
You're
Brant,
amazing, Andhe.
and we landed upright by the grace of God. And like miraculously, there was a CHP officer on the scene, and he went over to Brand. He said, "You need to get her out of the car," because we were on a highway. And so Brant tried to stabilize me as much as he could, and he pulled me from the car. And this is like middle of winter in Utah, so not
Cold.
warm. Yeah, very cold. And which Utah's beautiful, but it is dang cold in Utah.
Yeah.
And so he pulled me from the car and he laid me in the snow, and he was trying to do the best he could to stabilize me. I had somehow gotten like a huge gash in my head. I don't know. We don't know how that happened. But I was like bleeding all over him, and we had to wait for help to come. I like kind of remember a bunch of paramedics being around. And I remember like laying there, and all I wanted to do was get up and look for my dogs. I wanted to have some kind of like semblance of control in the situation, and I couldn't, and I was completely reliant on everybody. And an ambulance came to try and stabilize me, and then a helicopter came, and I was helivaced to the University of Utah Medical Center, which I found out later was and is like one of the top like ortho spine centers in the world. So like another huge God thing. And
Totally.
as I was being helivaced out, I like pleaded with Brant to please find our dogs. And my brother, who came to help, and eventually convinced him to go in and to get checked out as well. And by the grace of God, he was totally okay, which is amazing. When I got to the like once I don't really remember the helicopter ride very much. I remember being in the helicopter, and I remember trying to stay awake because I was afraid that I had a concussion, and I wasn't sure what would happen if I fell asleep. And then I kind of remember like being rolled into the med center, and I remember hearing my nephew, my sister-in-law had come, and I remember hearing him crying, and I remember thinking, that's my nephew. And then my sister-in-law came over, and she looked at me, and she was like, oh my God. And I like remember the fear in her voice, and that is when I think I realized how serious it was. And they pulled me. Once I got in there, they numbed my head and had to give me, I don't even remember how many now, between 15 to 18 staples in my head to close up my gash. And they pulled me into a room and they were evaluating whether or not they had to do surgery. I had broken 3 bones in my neck, and later that night, they told me that I needed to have surgery. The doctor told me I was about 1 millimeter away from being paralyzed. And so like by the grace of God, like I'm walking and moving right now. It's a huge blessing. But I went in for surgery, and I remember when I came out of surgery, I was laying in the hospital, and I remember thinking, I have to go back to work. Like I'm going to have to write sub plans. Thank God I was on winter break as a teacher, but I remember thinking, I'm going to have to go back to the real world after this. And I was in the hospital for, gosh, I don't even remember, like 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
A long time. I was in the hospital, recovering. And, when I was discharged, I needed to wait until, am I still in?
Yeah, you're good.
Sorry. Okay. I had to wait till I was stable enough to come home. And so I went to my brother and sister-in-law's place. In the meantime, one of our dogs was found and the other was still missing. And one thing you need to know about me is that I love my dogs.
Yeah.
Maybe more than they are my fur children. And so in the midst of trying to heal from trauma, physically, and then the emotional piece of trying to understand why this was happening and what was going on. I also had this lingering anxiety over my dog is somewhere out in the snow wandering around trying to find me. And I have no control over going to find him. And we looked for him for 2 weeks. In the middle of that time, I was able to fly home, and when I flew home and got home, I had to start immediately making sub plans, which I have just the most wonderful staff that I work with. They're amazing, and they really stepped in to help. But I remember being in a place where I was just unable emotionally and even physically. I had such a hard time sitting up. I had to get a desk that I needed to have lay in bed with me where I could lay down, to the point where one of my dear friends had to write my first few sets of sub plans for me because I just could not. I found out in the middle of that I also did not have disability, which I did not know. Until that happened. I thought I had been paying into disability this whole time because as teachers, we pay into a lot of stuff. Right. And you just kind of assume okay, I'm paying into disability, but I was not paying into disability. And on top of that, Brant had to take off a few weeks from work to take care of me. And he went back to try and find our dog.
Was that unpaid time off too?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So on top of everything.
Yes, on top of everything. And we had and have an amazing community who really came alongside of us, both financially and even meal wise and things. And we'll talk about that as well. Had it not been for them, they just really came around us. But Bria ended up flying back out once he dropped me off to go and find our dog. And there was an amazing group of people that came around, people that we did not know. One guy flew him around in a helicopter to try and find our dog, just had a helicopter and flew him around. And just strangers who came out to help us find him. But Brant found him not alive. And I think in the midst of so much physical and emotional trauma, that was just a really unthinkable end to everything. And so in the midst of me trying to come back to some kind of semblance of having to work while I'm still at home healing, and then having to process trauma, and obviously I'm still processing, it's not completely there yet. I had to step into the impact. And it's obviously not something that that you expect ever. I think that's the
Mm-hmm.
definition of impact, right? Like you don't expect things. Like we were fine, we were fine physically. We were both very healthy.
Mm-hmm.
We were fine financially. Like we were comfortable. And I think you never think it can happen to you until it does.
Right.
And so, yeah, we are still in the process of healing. I think we've come far, and I think we're finally in the place where we can start to say that we're doing okay. Our Bible study this week asked us like how we were doing, and I think it was the first time we were like, we're actually doing pretty good, which is a huge blessing. But I think, you know, there's obviously like so much to say about bracing for impact. So
Totally. And
yeah.
thank you so much for being brave enough to share that story. There was so many chills hearing you tell that story, and I've heard it before, and it's just unthinkable all around on all facets, the physical, the emotional, the work, the financial component. It's just a very overwhelming thing. So thank you very much for being
You're
vulnerable and
welcome.
sharing that with us. You're obviously, as you just said, walking in impact right now. You're still feeling the effects and recovering from what has happened. So
Mm-hmm.
what are some of the ways that you were braced in the situation you experienced for impact? What ways were you prepared, that whether you intentionally did or didn't, that you did that?
Yeah. I think one thing that I think I even mentioned before is finding a community. I
Mm-hmm.
think, I don't know what it is. I don't know what, if you've like experienced this at all, but like when you get into the adult world, it's sometimes really hard to find your people,
Totally.
especially when you like move to a different city. You leave your like your college people if you went to college. I think it can be really hard to like find a solid community that is going to come around you, who
Mm-hmm.
will kind of be there. And I think it's like a lot of give and take. One thing, I was talking to Brant about this morning, and um, he was like, like you got to brace for impact by being other people's impact. Like being in their impact. And I was like, oh
Mm-hmm.
my gosh, that's so true. Like you have to be present for other people so that when it's your turn, um, they're in it with you too.
Absolutely.
I
Totally.
think like sometimes it's a give and take. And I think there have been seasons where I've been good at this and seasons where I've been really bad at this. um, but I think being present and putting yourself out there and like finding those people are really important. Like we had such a solid group of people who came around us when we could not function. They started a GoFundMe for us. They checked in on us. They cooked for us. Um, they I remember when we found out about Chopper, I was on the phone with Brant, and one of my really dear friends asked if she could bring me coffee. And it was so serendipitous, which is the second time I've used that word. I never use that word. Um, but she happened to ask if she could bring me coffee right before we found out. And so she was with me like when we found out, in the midst of everything. And so I think community for sure is so important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Chelsea, exactly. There are so many people at different points in life, and I think that there has to be some like intentionality in it,
Right.
which can be really hard, especially I think when you have kids, to be so like, right. And I don't know, like I don't have kids, so if I'm like overstepping, what, you have to tell
No,
me.
no,
But
not at
I
all.
think like because you are like on like a different schedule and like your responsibility is taking care of your kids, it can be really hard to step in and like make that an intentional piece.
Absolutely.
But I think it does take like work and intentionality to build community. But
Mm-hmm.
it's so important. I like can't even. It's so important. That was such a big piece for us, and a piece that we are like just so grateful for.
Yeah.
Because I think, like I said, when you're at a place where you can't stand, like you need people to pick you up, and that is the most, I don't know, that's so important.
Totally.
Yeah. Another thing I think that was really powerful was personal growth reading. That we had done in the last couple of years, like a lot of personal growth reading, which I think when you do that, you are putting a wall around your mind and bracing your mind for challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like when you are put in the midst of impact and you have prepared your mindset for that, I think it's so much easier to find joy and gratitude in trauma than it would have been otherwise. Because I think when you're in heartache and trauma, it can be very easy to sink into, this might be a dramatic word, but like despair.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
know, and I don't, can you hear
Oh,
all of that
you just cut out a
wind?
little bit right there. Hey, Shelby
Okay.
Fox is on. I know her.
Hey, she is my sister-in-law. Shelby, I talked about you. I love you. And so I think like bracing your mind is is just so important. So I think doing personal growth reading, like putting that wall around your mind.
Yeah, I think it's just real quick. I think that we
Yeah.
had just talked about this on a training that we listened to about there are two types of people, and I think the training specifically said a car crash, which is kind of ironic in this situation, but it said
Mm-hmm.
after a car crash, there are two types of people, the person who makes their whole life a result of them being a victim of the car crash, or the people who say, well, what do I do with my life now that I'm so grateful that I have it? How can I change my mindset and my focus on what I'm grateful for instead of what has happened to me, which is obviously horrific and terrible, but
Mm-hmm.
not letting it define you is huge.
Yeah. And I think there's so much to be grateful for all the time, even in the midst of trauma.
Yeah.
In fact, after the accident, like Brant and I sat down and we were like very intent, like we're like, let's make a list right now of all the things that we're grateful for. Like we just need to make a list of everything that God has done right now, even though right now we're hurting and we don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually like even before this, like went in and looked at like some of the things that I did not even like remember. But just like practicing that gratitude, like that did not come like from nowhere. That came from doing
Intention.
the intention, like doing the intentional personal work so that when impact hit, we were in a place where we could do that.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean it's easy, and it doesn't mean it's not okay to feel like sad.
WTF.
Another word. Yeah, like exactly, to feel like what the actual heck is going on.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are places of that. And I think sometimes it's hard to like navigate that weird space between being really grateful and like putting those barriers around your mind, and then also just being so confused and not understanding like why things are happening the way that they are. And I
Mm-hmm.
think to like lead into that, I think growing our faith was such a big piece of this as well. Because in that weird space of like not understanding, like we questioned God a lot in this situation. And we like, I went back again, I like looked at a journal entry that I wrote, and so much of it was just questioning God, like, God, why is this happening? Like, what is going on? Why, why did I get so injured? And like, and then also, why did we lose our dog at the same time? Like, this doesn't seem like it's in your character. Like, I don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
But I think being in a place where like we had trusted God in small stuff, and we had practiced in the small things, and even in things that didn't seem so small. Like we had people who know us will know that we had an instance this last year with our dogs and the mail woman. And that was like and it's still kind of an ongoing thing. And so there have been other things in our life where we have had to trust God. And I think trusting God in the smaller things made it so much easier to trust in his goodness and his character in the big stuff. that like we
Mm-hmm.
had to remind ourselves of his character and intentionally seek and trust him to find hope in a place that felt really
Hopeless.
hopeless.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that made it so much easier to remember that like he is constant and he doesn't fail and he doesn't let us down. And one thing I read, and I haven't finished it yet, but I will because it's so good. But Lisa TerKeurst has a book called It's Not Supposed to Be This Way. If you ever go through trauma, or even before you go through trauma, read that book because it's so amazing. But one thing she talks about in there is that God promises to make something new and beautiful out of dust. And I think that is one thing that like, that was a line that really resonated with me in like the early seasons of this, is because I just felt like everything was kind of just a dust and I had to trust like, God, you know what you're doing. I don't understand this. And I think one thing I've
Mm-hmm.
learned is it's okay. It's okay to not totally understand. But in the midst of that, like trusting God's character, like that came from being intentional and trusting him in the small things so that when the big things came, like I know who he is and I know what he's about. And we were able to like lean into Jesus, even when it didn't make sense. Um, thank you for typing
Mm-hmm.
that. And then I think finally, like the financial piece of it, it's funny. I feel like talking about this makes me feel like a little bit superficial about it, but I also feel like it's so important. Like, I mean, money, like, what do we say? Like, money's not everything, but like, you kind of need it to survive, right? Like,
It's right up there
what
with
is,
oxygen.
thank you. I was like, what is the
Yeah.
quote? Like, who says that quote again?
Oh, I don't remember. Somebody.
Zig
Somebody
Ziglar.
smart.
Zig Ziglar.
Is it?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's Zig Ziglar. But I think, and gosh, by no means are we like in any way, any kind of financial experts at all. But I have like always loved teaching. I like love the kids. They are so crazy, but they are so crazy, right? Especially right now. Like you guys, we're just now on spring break. Okay. I just want you to like think about that for a moment. Like when I teach 8th grade 14-year-olds and all of their friends are on spring break, like weeks before them, they are dying. They think they're dying. And so,
If
so I
only
like,
they
anyway,
knew.
if only they knew. I know. But I like love their weird little selves. And I always had it in my head that like when we have kids, I'll be able to kind of like step out of this and then come back to work when like, you know, my kids are older or like, you know, when they're sick or whatever. I just kind of had this in my brain. And so I was saving up sick days for when we had kids because I wanted to be able to take that time. And okay, but like, here's what happens when you don't have disability or when you're a teacher in general, at least in my district, is you have to use up all your sick days first before you can use any disability, which I didn't even have anyway. And so
Yeah.
all of those sick days that I'd been saving up over the past 7 years, like they're gone now. And so a lot of people know that I run a business in addition to working full time. And that having that as a piece of what we had built before going into this accident, I think gave us a lot more financial security because even when I couldn't work, the thing about business ownership is that when you build a business and you build it to the point where it kind of runs itself, you have created residual income, right? And so thank God, like it is such a blessing. Who would have known 2.5 years ago, like when I stepped into this, which was very uncomfortable. I'm not gonna lie. It's like very uncomfortable. I'm a teacher, right? So like starting a business is like not a thing that I ever thought I would do ever. Like I teach English, like I don't teach economics. Like I don't, you know what I mean? I don't know. And so I think like 2.5 years later, like being in a place where like I was laying in bed and residual income was continuing, like that was a huge gift. Like I can't even, yeah, it was just a blessing that I didn't know that I would need. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
And so I think like with that understanding the gift that was for me, has like helped us kind of continue in that now, like being more able-bodied and stuff. But I think the financial piece as well, like having had that like second stream of income
Sure.
was huge, especially because Brant couldn't work for a few weeks as well.
Yeah. So,
And like stepping back into like medical bills and stuff, like we had to pay, this might be too much information. I'm going to share it anyway. But like we had to pay out of pocket for like one of my medications, like $1,000. And like,
geez.
well, right. Like we'll get that back. But like God had blessed us and like blessed our business in a way that allowed us to pay for that without having to feel stressed
Right.
about, about like, like putting that on a credit card or whatever. And so we feel like super blessed with that piece of it as well.
Yeah, I definitely think that having multiple streams of income is just a smart way to shape your life, just because you never know when you may be out of the game with one of those sources of income. So
Mm-hmm.
if you have a diversified income, then you can technically, pick and choose where you focus, or focus across the board, as long as you don't spread yourself too thin, right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
So,
And it's all about like building it in and stuff and like, making
right.
time for what's important.
So we're already running a little bit long. I just wanted to ask a question to the audience. No, it's okay. Thank you so much. I could talk to you forever, I swear. But to the audience, I wanted to pose this question to you after hearing Andhe's story. Have you ever had an unexpected expense, like an $1,000 medical bill or a car accident, come up that you hadn't financially planned for? What was it and how did you handle it? I would love to know your tips and tricks if you have something we haven't discussed. And again, after hearing how Andhe prepared herself for impact, what do you think, what steps are you going to take that are going to make you more braced for an impactful situation to happen to you? If you're feeling brave, let me know in the comments below. And outside of that, can you give some major hearts and likes for Andhe, because she just came on and was so amazing and transparent and authentic. And I love you, Andhe, so much.
Love you too. Thanks.
Show some respect for that. The only thing, maybe we can just touch really quickly on what things you didn't prepare for, Andhe, that you wish you had, and let your hindsight be our foresight.
Yeah. I think before the accident, oh, hearts, thanks,
Hearts,
guys.
hearts, hearts.
I think before the accident, I think I mentioned this already, but we had gotten very comfortable. Like life was good. We were like doing our day to day. But I think that it's in, Chelsea, yes, you will.
Yay.
I think in comfort, it is easy to stay still. I think both in comfort financially, I think in comfort spiritually, even like, I don't know, and just like day to day. And I think when we stay where we are instead of pushing ourselves to do the things that are uncomfortable, that are going to make us grow, and that could look different for everybody. We are preventing ourselves from moving into where God wants us to be, and like where we're meant to be. I don't know, and I feel like maybe that's you, like that was me. And maybe like you're the person that's like, I'll do this later, and maybe after XYZ, and maybe after this, it'll be a good time. But gosh, I'm like telling you, you guys, there will literally never be a good time. There will never be a good time. And I think I took so much for granted. I'm sure I still do. Like, I'm sure that there's so much growth left. But impact is going to come. And in The 7 Decisions by Andy Andrews, which is an amazing read, everybody should read that book. He talks about how like you're either coming out of a crisis, or you're in a crisis, or you're heading towards a crisis. And that line like always stuck with me, because I was like, amen, brother. Like, that's so true.
It's pretty cynical, but it's honest.
But I'm like, but it is kind of but I think accurate. It's like, it's so true. And I think being willing to do what's uncomfortable and to step into where you know you're supposed to be, just despite the fact that it's not going to be easy at 1st, I think is like a big thing, like that we were not doing pre-accident.
Sure.
So I don't know if that's like concrete way to say like what we could have done to prepare for impact, but I think just like stepping into being uncomfortable a little bit more than
Sure.
we were, and stepping into like where God has called us, I think is the big one. Yeah.
Well, and it sounds like you took action in the ways that you could. And to me, when we talk about being uncomfortable, it's not just like, oh, I'm uncomfortable, so I should start a business. That's not necessarily what we're saying. There are a lot of perks to you having your own business, because it did help with your funds. However, uncomfortable could mean, not eating out as much so you could put more money toward your retirement. Uncomfortable could mean that you pay off your debts when you'd rather go to Disneyland, so that then you don't have that revolving debt going on, right? So
it could be stepping into the community. Like it could be going and meeting a new person, even though you're an introvert and it feels really scary, like our community also was like a huge piece in like our healing process, like both financially, like I mentioned, they started GoFund, like financially and like physically, like bringing us food, like that is a piece too. Like sometimes it's going to take being uncomfortable and stepping out into groups, which I think is really scary too sometimes.
Totally. Well, this was really, really powerful, and I feel personally impacted by you sharing your story. So thank you so much. Everyone, again, be so grateful that Andhe was willing and able to hop on with us. I'm going to recap real quick. This obviously was us discussing, what we know, having Andhe walked through it, having seen the steps that she's taken outwardly, and then just there's stuff that we don't know. We're not perfect. Like you said, we're not financial planners.
Gosh, I'm not perfect, and I don't know a lot of stuff. So
yeah, we are such a work in progress. But I just, again, for the millionth time, thank you, Andhe, so much for sharing your story. I wanted to remind everyone else, if you missed the beginning of this, you can catch it on the replay on Facebook. But we also have a YouTube channel, so I will post the link in this thread as soon as it's done. It won't let me post before. So you can subscribe and follow us on YouTube if you'd like. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram. My handle is WhitneyJanelle28. Wendy is a.wendy.bird. And you can also follow Andhe if you're so inclined at Andhe Robinson. So we are all on Insta. We would love to get to know you guys, build a community. And we will see you guys next week. Unfortunately, we won't see Andhe, but maybe she'll make a guest appearance down the line. I don't know. But next week, we'll be talking about network marketing. Oh my gosh. OMG. So everyone have a wonderful night and wonderful rest of your day. Thank you again, Andhe. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks so much for having me, you guys. I feel very fortunate. So thank you.
Have a good day. Bye.
Bye, guys.